You're looking at now, and his teammate Gerhard Berger. They finished first and second, and they lapped all the other 8 finishers. I'm not expecting much more than 10 cars to finish today, frankly, out of the 26 that start, because although so many cars went off last year, spun off out of the race, stalled their engines, and of course were not allowed to restart, the heat today is undoubtedly going to be grueling, to put it very mildly indeed, both for the cars and the drivers. And I think certainly for the first time this season, we've got the unusual sight of 2 Williams on the front row, on the staggered front row of the grid, 2 McLarens behind.
San Marino Grand Prix, and Allard Kalf has literally hot-footed it back from the grid. Allard, it was hot out there, wasn't it?
It was very hot, John, and I'm really happy there was a cool tunnel in between here and the grid. And the grid we're looking at the moment, Nigel Mansell, his 22nd pole position. Riccardo Patrese joining him on the front row, his 229th Grand Prix. Then the McLaren twins, the Benetton and the Ferraris. Then Michele Alboreto, the footwork Mugen, a very good qualifying performance from him. Thierry Boutsen, Guri Suzuki, Paul Wendinger, O'Neilly had a roll this morning. Eric Thomas, Andrea De Cesaris, Pierluigi Martini and JJ Leto on the same row with Dallara with the Ferrari engine. Then Ukio Katayama, Mauricio Gugelmin, Bertrand Gachot and Olivier Grouillard on the 10th row. The 11th row, Gianni Morbidelli and the only front metal Ford of Gabriele Tarquini, Stefano Modena, who won't be there, Paul Belmondo on that penultimate row. And on the last row, Christian Fittipaldi and Johnny Herbert, who I haven't seen, John, but I asked him just before he went out, just before the pit lane was open, and I said, which car are you going to use? And he definitely said the 107. So we'll see a picture of that car, hopefully very soon, to confirm that. He was 10th quickest in the warm-up this morning, but we do have the suspicion that they didn't run a full tank test.
Well, we suspect very strongly indeed that they didn't. They just ran the car just to get some mileage. One thing is for sure, that the time that Michele Alboreto set this morning, second quickest time in that unofficial 30-minute session between 9:30 and 10 o'clock, was not done with a car full of fuel. That was the spare car, in fact, that Michele Alboreto used. They had an engine problem in the race car, but nonetheless, a lot of improvement coming from the Footwork Mugen Honda team. And really they're looking to get yet another, the 3rd consecutive points finish in this 1992 season. Well, there is red number 5, Nigel Mansell's famous number 5, and he's looking for a 5th victory. Saw him a few minutes ago sitting by his car looking extremely pensive, deep in contemplation, and really all his concentration now will be focused on that red light going to green. And really he wants to get into Tamburello corner ahead of Riccardo Patrese, get on with the program as quickly as he can, try not to abuse his, we suspect, D-compound Goodyear tires, and really just signal his intent to win his 5th Grand Prix this year.
Well, and Riccardo Patrese, of course, starting, as I said, his 229th Grand Prix. He's been in Las Vegas in the early 80s, where it was even hotter than here, when Keke Rosberg won with the Williams Honda. And they're another man who's used to those temperatures.
Williams Cosworth, in fact.
Well, thank you very much, John.
Because he beat me in the championship in Las Vegas 1982, I should know.
Well, there we see Martin Brandon. Just before we saw Michael Schumacher, who might be used to these temperatures because he's been racing sports cars for Mercedes for the last couple of years. And in one of those sports cars, it does get very hot indeed. There's not a lot of ventilation in the cockpit, and temperatures rise very, very high.
In fact, I think the race you're referring to, Allard, was Dallas 1984, where it really was, I mean, that was the hottest race I'd ever been to. And Keke Rosberg, as you quite rightly pointed out, did win it, but he had a thing called a cool hat. Racing teams in America use these cool hats and cool suits quite regularly in these very hot conditions. But in Formula One, space and weight is at a premium. So it is not normal these days to see a team carrying, you've got to carry a box of ice water with a small refrigeration unit on it. There just is not the space in the cars these days to do it. So it's down to the driver really to make the best physical preparation he can during the off-season, and really the dietary and fluid aspect of your training becomes more and more crucial.
Well, the warm-up lap there through Tamburello corner. Then we have that right flat-out right kink, which is called Villeneuve, and then into Tosa, and that will be the prime overtaking spot, especially on the third lap, I would say.
Yes, into Tosa normally provides a bit of excitement. Usually midfield and tail-end cars tend to overrun into the corner. The cars leading brake probably marginally earlier in the opening lap, and of course braking distances then have got to be recalibrated, and some drivers aren't quite capable of that, it seems, from time to time. So the Tosa is often a case of shut your eyes and just go for the gap. But in fact, I'm really more concerned about everyone getting round Tamburello the first time cleanly. And as I mentioned earlier, all eyes will be on John Alesi, who's been driving very, very aggressively all weekend. 2 weeks ago, been brought in front of the stewards prior to the proceedings beginning on Friday, and just about his driving, he was brought back in along after those two collided on Friday in qualifying, and then apparently they were both brought in a second time jointly, a third time for Alesi, and sort of basically banged their heads together and said, look, you two guys, behave yourself. We've got a long race here. Don't bring the sport into disrepute by activities on the circuit. We want a clean start, we want a clean race, and we want a good race.
Well, I think we're going to see a very good race, and I certainly hope we're going to see a very good race. Nigel Mansell, who's been fastest again in all the sessions held so far here at Imola, through the last, well, that's a nearly flat out chicane, then into the chicane proper, and then onto the starting grid.
Yes, Mansell really bringing the cars, the lead cars, down to a very, very slow pace. He doesn't want to be sitting on the grid for any length of time. Of course, Poleman is the first to stop. He will want the grid to be as tight as possible so that the minimum amount of time and the minimum amount of heat sink can occur to his car. The last thing he wants is the overflow from the water system to pour water onto the grid, which might get onto his rear tyres and then therefore negate any start line advantage from pole position.
On your right, you can see Nigel Mansell on the left, Riccardo Patrese, then the two McLarens, then the two Benettons, and here we see John Alesi's Ferrari. And maybe we should have that onboard camera when the light goes to red, John.
Well, I certainly would like to see it inboard in John Alesi's Ferrari. It undoubtedly is going to be an exciting moment, and I'm sure he's going to go for the gap between the two lines of cars.
Well, there's a green flag, then there will be the 5-second board, and after the 5-second board the red light will go on, and then it'll change to green, and we're gone for 61 laps, 191 miles, and there's yellow flag.
Yes, we're going to have an aborted start. Well, people jumping over, Marshall jumping over, and I suspect now...
And we can see JJ Leto waving his arms, so that might be a stalled Ferrari engine.
Yes, 5-minute board has gone out, and that's not what anybody wants on a very, very hot day like this. The cars, again, having to sit on the grid. We'll go through the countdown procedure once again, and then yet another.
The Ferrari garage, just before the lights went on, and a few minutes before that there had been a lot of mechanics fussing around the back of his car. He was out of the cockpit. There's Chris Murphy, incidentally, in the green and white shirt, walking towards us, the man who designed the new Lotus. I see a lot of people that will be familiar to Formula One followers, and we've got Jonathan Palmer down in the pit lane with us, and no doubt he's rushing about finding out what's happening. We'll get over to Jonathan as soon as we can. Meantime, James, what does this do to you if you're a driver?
Well, funny enough, I can't speak for others. For me, when you had an abort like this, it rather tended to be more relaxing. One would be having built up the tension and had, you know, quite a high dose of adrenaline brought on by the nerves for the original start. When there was an abort, I found, you know, that one tended to be, or I certainly tended to be more relaxed coming into to a restart. But as I say, I think it's very individual for the drivers. One thing that will be bothering them, of course, it is extremely hot in those cars, and without the benefit of air moving around them, even hotter. So sitting on the grid for another 5 minutes will not be a pleasant and comfortable experience, and it's not really time to get out. It's such an effort getting in and out of those cars, and they're so tight that you waste more energy doing that. So they will be cooking in those cars.
And I'm down on the grid now, having just spoken to Carl Wendlinger in the March, and his problem is one of a clutch. He cannot disengage the clutch, which meant that he could not have selected first gear from neutral to make that start. So he's going to have to now start from the back of the field when eventually the grid reform.
So you're looking at the grid again, and it's been a pretty grisly morning for Carl Wendlinger already. As I said, on only his second lap in the half-hour warm-up. It's traditional that on the Sunday morning, and this morning it was at 9:30 Italian time, 8:30 UK time, they go out for a final half hour of practice. They are timed, of course, as usual, to 1,000th of a second. Those times do not affect the grid, much to the disco. You're looking at Johnny Herbert. I was just going to talk about him. He's the top driver in the background. I was going to say much to the disgust of Johnny Herbert, because if the times had affected the grid, he would have started in 10th position. And because this race has been aborted, and because they are not refueling on the grid, that means to say that what was going to be a 61-lap race will now be a 60-lap race. 60 laps of Imola. So that is, you can do the arithmetic. It's 191 miles for 61 laps. Subtract 3.122 from that, and you've got the new race distance. So something like 188 laps. But they should have, there's the confirmation, the caption there. And there should be, obviously, enough fuel for the cars. I'm mildly surprised because that they haven't started getting the reflective blankets out to keep the fuel cool. It's extremely hot down there. And by the way, I was told this morning, I frankly find this almost impossible to believe, but I was told this morning that the Renault engine, and certainly the new Renault engine, which I remind you is a 3.5 litre atmospheric, that means to say it doesn't have a turbocharger engine, is developing close on 800 horsepower. Now, when I tell you that the turbo cars were producing about 850 horsepower in race trim, that shows you how fast technology has moved in the last few years. The Ferraris, the McLarens and the Williams, of course, all have semi-automatic gearboxes. The Williams is the only car in this race, that of Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese, with the active suspension, no steel springs. That is Carl Wendlinger that you just saw there. There is Eric Comas. There are the two Ferrari red Dalaras, which is appropriate enough because they've both got 1992 specification V12 Ferrari engines, and we're off on another hopefully final sighting lap.
Yes, and Wendlinger, they'll have to give him a push, and quite what he'll do remains to be seen. I would have thought he'll go into the pit lane and had to be pushed to get it into gear and poodle away slowly from the pit lane if he's got, they cannot get the clutch operative. I thought maybe when he was still sitting on the grid there that they had possibly repaired his clutch, but it doesn't look like it.
So we're with Michael Schumacher now. I remind you, the Benettons have got the camera on the right, the Ferraris have got the camera on the left, a sideways mounted camera, which doesn't actually give you the driver's eye view because he's in the middle of the car and we're slightly to the right or the left of it, but a very good picture just the same. Pictures beamed up from the car to the helicopter, down to the station and out to you.
Yeah, and you can see Wendlinger there working the steering wheel a little bit, because what he's doing, he's giving it plenty on the tyres there, but he's giving it plenty of boot coming out of the corners, spin the rear wheels a bit.
Live coverage of the 1992 San Marino Grand Prix. We're on board Michael Schumacher, and John, you can see the little gauges in the man's cockpit.
Yes, just on top of the steering wheel there are two digital readouts, one on the left giving the speed the car is travelling at, the one on the right is a G meter, and we were able to look at that on Saturday morning in the unofficial session, and Schumacher under braking was pulling something like 3.06 G coming into the Tossa hairpin, pulling over 2.5 G in the left-hand Tamburello corner and reaching something like 198 to 200 miles an hour at the end of the straight.
Well, we've seen last year's Mexican Grand Prix where we tried to get away and we had two aborted starts, if I remember right, when it was very hot in temperatures like this, and let's hope we get away cleanly now from our second start. Of course, the race now only 60 laps, So as you said, it could be a little bit better for people not having sufficient fuel.
Well, that is a factor that we've seen before in certain Grand Prix. Canada's another Grand Prix which is always very marginal for the Formula One car with the tank capacity that they build into the car. One of the problems that we might see here, and could have been the problem for that false start the first time around, was fuel vaporization, because when the engine gets very hot, the heat soak around the fuel pipes, the top of the engine leading into the injection, can get little tiny air bubbles, and that could have been the cause of that misstart.
Well, there we see the last cars that have to go on the grid, Christian Fittipaldi, Johnny Herbert, and I believe I could see that new Lotus 107 being put on that last row of the grid. Actually, I'm pretty sure from here it's a new Lotus 107. We're waiting again for the green flag, and then the red light. Well, there we see the red light goes on, and it's changed to green, and a very good start for Nigel Mansell. A yellow flag again. Did someone stall?
Yes, I think it was Christian Fittipaldi stalled, but Michael Schumacher coming through on the inside. Well, Martin Brundle's gotten ahead of him, and fortunately all 25 cars, because not 26 made the first corner, have gotten through cleanly. But look at that gaggle. Ayrton Senna third behind the two McLarens coming into Tossa. Patrese defending, closing the gap on the left-hand side of the road. But there is where trouble is going to happen.
Well, the trouble on your left, but the Italian director, I think, following the Ferraris, of course, and the car getting away last was one of the Venturi LaRousse cars, either Katayama or Gasho, but it's very firmly the two Williams in the lead, and the Williams are on the D compound tires, and then it's Ayrton Senna, who we believe is on C compound tires.
Well, I think McLaren had not a great deal of choice. They are having trouble with the D compound and full tanks. They were tending to blister those tires, so really the decision was elementary, and well, Senna, look at that, got pressure from Martin Brundle. Gerhard Berger next, Michael Schumacher, then John Alesi and Ivan Capelli. But Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese got the dream start they're both after. Gerhard Berger looking coming down the inside, and he squeezed through Martin Brundle. Martin pushed wide on the exit of the first part of the Ravazza, and Michael Schumacher trying to get through as well.
Well, Michael didn't really get through, but it's two McLarens following two Williams, and a very good move by Gerhard Berger. And last night we were talking about how to overtake, John, and he said, well, you said, well, you've got to be very decisive and know when you're going to make your move, and this was a very decisive move.
Yes, Berger went for a gap. There was a small gap, and Martin Brundle, I think, probably slightly being cautious at the start of the race. He desperately wants to finish a Grand Prix, and he's prepared to concede the issue, particularly on the first lap. But look, Michael Schumacher now pushing Martin, in fact, pushing Schumacher very hard indeed, as they come up on the climb up from the Tossa hairpin up to this Piratella corner, flat and fifth over the crest, down to fourth on the brakes, and into the first part of the left-hand. Piratella taking fifth gear on the exit, and that's where the semi-automatic gearbox, of course, has a significant advantage. You can keep both hands on the wheel.
Well, after the 8 cars we've mentioned before, we've got Thierry Boutsen in the Ligier Renault, then the two Footwork Mugen Hondas, and then we see two Delaras, and they might go pretty well on full tanks. JJ this morning said he wasn't really happy with the handling of the car, but the times were getting better.
In the meantime, the two Williams have disappeared. They're out of sight. We're now seeing Ayrton Senna in third, Gerhard Berger fourth, Martin Brundle fifth, Michael Schumacher still in sixth. And really, I suspect that Michael Schumacher will make another attempt to vacate Martin Brundle's fifth place at the end of this long pit straight. He will try and get a run out of the chicane, pick up the two coming through Tamburello, and then as they come down out of the corner, down towards the Tossa, try to dive down the inside. And here we have the two Benettons. And Schumacher, you've got to be very careful. You don't want to get too close to the car ahead of you in the middle of the Tamburello, because you can lose the front end downforce. Well, look, there we see Schumacher attempting it. Martin closing the door. He did that rather nicely. I would say he wasn't quite as violent as other people might be. It was impossible for Schumacher to stick the nose of his car down even closer to the left.
Well, we've had 2 laps, and it's Nigel Mansell leading by 2.7 seconds from teammate Riccardo Patrese. Then Senna and Berger, Brundle and Schumacher. Then it's John Alesi, Ivan Capelli, and the rest of the field led by Thierry Boutsen. But the Williams, again, well, they got away on that first lap. Nigel had his dream start, got into Tossa first, ahead of teammate Riccardo Patrese, and he's making full use of that clean track ahead of him.
Well, in car with Michael Schumacher running in 6th place behind his teammate Martin Brundle. And with such evenly matched performances between these two Benetton Fords, really it'll come down to the strategy that one can play off against the other. Martin really not wishing to concede his position, 5th place, to his teammate. But of course Martin, having not yet finished a Grand Prix in 1992, will have in mind that elusive first finish, preferably in the points, and if push comes to shove, I'm quite sure he will make way for Michael Schumacher, since the last thing he would want to have happen is he and his teammate dispute a position, and that's the tear-off from Schumacher's helmet being thrown away. But Schumacher not close enough to really do anything about Martin Brundle, and really deciding to consolidate over this lap into Tossa hairpin bend. There's a pointed overtaking when really it's not advantageous to run very, very close to the car ahead of you. The thing that you really want to do most of all is build up your momentum and carry that momentum past the car you're trying to overtake.
Well, here we see positions after 3 laps, the top 6. Well, as it was in qualifying, except that Martin Brundle is in front of Michael Schumacher, his teammate. Nothing's really changed after that. It's the 2 Ferraris, Boutsen in the Ligier Renault, and then the 2 footwork Mugen Hondas of Michele Alboreto and Aguri Suzuki. Martini and Leto in the Dallara Ferraris behind them. Andrea de Cesaris in 14th. Mauricio Guzman in 15th. Olivier Grouillard is 16th. 17th, Eric Gomez. 18th, Ukiyo Katayama. So we assume that Bertrand Gachot was left at the start. Christian Fittipaldi is 19th. And in 20th place, Gabriele Tarquini in the only Von Metal Ford. But an interesting duel there, and maybe Jean Alesi will be able to pick up on the tail of Michael Schumacher.
Well, Schumacher looked like he was beginning to make preparation for another lunge at Martin Brundle's 5th place. In the meantime, of course, that's allowing Jean Alesi to catch up to the gearbox of Michael Schumacher. But let's have a look and see into the Tossa hairpin bend. Can Schumacher do anything at all with his teammate Martin Brundle? Oh, well, he tried under brakes and he could be in trouble. Well, he's just kept it. Oh my goodness, Jean Alesi did exactly the same thing here 1 year ago, but he ended up in the sand trap. But Schumacher, very, very late on the brakes indeed. The car locked brakes. He ran wide, got onto the marbles on the outside of the circuit, and he must have held his breath because he just got away with that by the skin of his teeth. Look, right rear locking on. The car gets drawn out to the edge of the track. He just, oh my goodness. Oh dear me, a high moment of tension for Michael Schumacher. Well, he really hasn't lost a great deal of time. He's picked up the pace instantly. Of course, getting wide in the corner like that will mean his tyres have picked up the dust, the dirt, the rubber that's on the outside of the corner after 2 days of qualifying and practice. Well, no one's ever told Michael Schumacher anything like that's going to hold him back for very long. And I only suspect his intentions will become all the more tenacious, because I'm sure Michael Schumacher believes that he's being held back by his teammate Martin Brundle. But Gerhard Berger now beginning to fall back into the class of the 2 Benetton Fords. And remember that we know the McLarens did start on that C-compound Goodyear tyre. We're not sure what Benetton have done. We suspect they may be on the D-compound, and that will give them an advantage in terms of grip and overall lap time and performance.
Well, knowing Benetton, John, they might have sent one car around on the D-compound and one car on the C-compound.
It's not an unheard of thing to do that. But I suppose in Benetton you have to consider right now Martin Brundle would be the man that they would put on to the C's. Give Michael Schumacher every opportunity on the D's.
Well, and Jean Alesi, of course, we know he's on C-compound tyres. He told us just before the start of the race, and there we see the gap between first and sixth place, nearly 14 seconds. Nigel Mansell hammering down that first 5 laps. 3.4 seconds is the gap with Riccardo Patrese. Then it's Ayrton Senna, who's already 7 seconds behind. And that's a long, long way. But everybody safe through those first couple of laps. We haven't seen any retirements yet, but definitely the gap between Martin Brundle and Gerhard Berger is closing.
Well, we saw on the first lap Gerhard Berger almost bully his way past Martin Brundle coming into the first part of the Ravazza. And that's just the nature, I think, of Gerhard Berger. He was really more with the programme on that first lap than Martin was. I suspect Martin was aware of Berger, his presence, and he didn't want to dispute the corner. He didn't want to have a collision, and he gave way in the corner. He nearly lost another position to his teammate Michael Schumacher. But in the meantime, there we see Nigel Mansell cruising serenely on his way in the lead. Some 3.8 seconds lead over his teammate Riccardo Patrese, and Johnny Herbert already about to have the presence of Nigel Mansell up with him.
Well, a replay of the start. We see Nigel Mansell having a very good start. Oh, Gerhard Berger and Michael Schumacher, who touched going into the first corner.
Yes, and that was really why Schumacher was the loser in that little duel. He got two wheels on to the grass on the inside. He's now got, I think it's John O'Leary alongside of him, and this is just a sheer drag now down into the Tosa Hairpin Bend. Well, that's Nigel Mansell already lapping Johnny Herbert. Johnny was the last qualifier for the Grand Prix, and he's in the new Lotus 107 with its active ride suspension, and in effect for Lotus this is really just a Grand Prix test. But undoubtedly when they go to Monte Carlo they will be much the better off for this 1.5 hours here at Imola.
Nigel Mansell leads Riccardo Patrese, Ayrton Senna, Gerhard Berger, Martin Brundle and Michael Schumacher. Join us live here at Imola after the break.
Work immediately ahead of him. Mansell, who has now increased his lead over Patrese to nearly 4 seconds. Patrese has increased his lead over Senna to nearly 10 seconds, and the race is between Gerhard Berger, who is in 4th position. There he is. We're back again with Schumacher, still chasing Martin Brundle, who is feeling relaxed. You saw the film move across the camera lens there. That's remotely operated from the helicopter above, and Michael Schumacher is lapping in 1:29.1, which is 9/10 of a second slower than race leader Nigel Mansell, as he tries to close with and get past Martin Brundle in 5th position. There they are, Berger, Brundle, Schumacher, the Aqua Minerale.
Yes, and we saw a little bit of a mistake, just a little mistake at the Tosa corner there from Brundle when we first were watching from the onboard camera. Schumacher wasn't quite close enough to go for the gap, and all order is restored. Brundle went a little bit wide, but not enough for Schumacher to get through. But Schumacher will be anxious, because I'm sure he wants to set about Berger's McLaren.
Yes, this fascinates me, this battle, because the most important person to beat when you are racing in Formula One is your own teammate. He's got the same equipment as you have, so you've got to establish dominance over him. Well, at the present moment, Martin Brundle is doing just that over Schumacher. Neither of them are making any progress on catching Gerhard Berger ahead, but now it looks to me as though Schumacher is starting to ease up a bit to make an attack on Brundle as they go round to the Tamburello.
Yes, is he close enough? He's picking up the toe there, but not quite close enough this time. But certainly, and he's having a look down the inside. Not close enough, and Brundle, quite rightly, sticks to his line. The onus was certainly on Schumacher then to get fully alongside. But very much there, see it again, he was coming from really always from a little bit too far back. But what he's got to do is...
Michael Schumacher once again trying to find a way past his teammate Martin Brundle at the Tosa Hairpin. Welcome back to Eurosport's live coverage of the 12th Grand Prix here in San Marino at the Imola circuit. And that is the battle of the race so far between the two Benetton boys. Martin Brundle in 5th, Michael Schumacher in 5th, and Schumacher trying everything he can to vacate Martin Brundle's 5th place, because he wants to get onto the gearbox of Gerhard Berger in 4th. Because I'm sure in Schumacher's mind he's being held up by Martin Brundle. But Brundle is doing the best he can. He's looking for the results of the season so far for himself. And really there are no team orders within the Benetton team at this stage in the season. Of course, a pit stop due probably in the next 12 to 15 laps. Of course, it's easier to pass in the pit than it is to try and battle your way past on the circuit. But in real terms, only 2 places where it is possible to make a clean, executed pass.
After 8 laps, Nigel Mansell was leading Riccardo Patrese by 4.3 seconds, and Nigel putting up another fastest lap of the race, a 1:27.550. And there is Christian Fittipaldi, the new car, the new Lamborghini engine, and out after 8 laps. He was in 19th place. But anyway, to go back to the top 6, Mansell, Patrese, Senna, Berger, Brundle, Schumacher, and then Alesi and Capelli. Nothing's changed so far, and Nigel Mansell being nearly a second quicker than teammate Riccardo Patrese on lap 9, and he now leads by 5.04 seconds, and he leads Ayrton Senna by 16 seconds.
Well, really the race here at Imola is between the two McLarens, the two Benettons, and Jean Alesi just trying to keep the two from the rear of Michael Schumacher's Benetton Ford. Well, the performance of these two Williams Renaults is really just absolutely remarkable. We thought we were going to see a much more competitive race. We saw a reasonably competitive qualifying, but yet again, the actively suspended Williams, the FW13Cs, with the RS3C engine, not the RS4 engine, really still the class of the field. And I was talking to some people in the pits this morning after the warm-up, discussing that new Renault, the RS4 engine, which they have yet not used in a Grand Prix. We've seen it in qualifying, but not in a race. And figures of close to 800 horsepower are being talked about with that special ELT qualifying and race fuel. So for a 3.5-litre naturally aspirated engine to be producing close to 800 horsepower is unbelievable, I tell you. I didn't imagine they were getting so close to that figure. And these are very, very fast Formula One cars, much, much quicker than the turbo cars we saw in the middle 80s.
That, of course, had full ground effect and, well, sliding skirts, John. I mean, technology is going forward all the time, and Formula One is one of the places where it goes forward as fast as nearly the cars are going at the moment.
Well, these two Benetton Fords are doing the best they can. Remember, they've got the V8 Ford HB engine running in the 6 Series configuration, giving in race form somewhere around about 680 to 700 horsepower. Honda, well, we don't know what they've got. We do feel that the new V12 engine, that's the slightly wider angle engine to that they used last year, is giving very, very good horsepower indeed. Now, whether it's up to the normal Honda standards, we're not quite sure. But we see an acceleration out of that chicane, for example, to the start-finish line. They have been consistently the quickest car, but they lose that speed through the Tamburello and down to the final intermediate time, where then the two Williams accelerate quicker and over 200 miles an hour. And that's probably a function in part of engine power, but more probably sheer aerodynamic efficiency. So there's not probably an awful lot wrong with the Honda V12 engine at this stage in the season. But for sure, what Williams have got in terms of horsepower and in terms of aerodynamic efficiency, class of their own.
Well, after 11 laps, this is the top 6. Mansell leads Riccardo Patrese by nearly 6 seconds. The rest of the top 12, Jean Alesi, Ivan Capelli, Thierry Boutsen, Michele Alboreto, Pierluigi Martini and JJ Leto. That means we've lost Aguri Suzuki, who's dropped down to 13th place behind the two Stellaras with the Ferrari engine. And Aguri being some 5 seconds behind, and there Ivan Capelli, and that's the sad side for the Italian fans. Ivan was in 6th place, 8th place, but his car was in the gravel.
Yes, that looks like that was an half more than a stop. It wouldn't be normal to just literally park the car in the gravel. So disappointment yet again for Ivan Capelli, and even more pressure on the Italian driver in the Italian team. Well, Schumacher running around Tamburello rather wide, but trying to get back into that slipstream of Martin Brundle and looking more threatening than we've seen him for some time. But Brundle just, oh Michael, don't do that, because you just might tip the left rear of Brundle, and that could be both the Benetton Fords out. Well, there we see, coming into Ackerman Rally chicane, Ivan Capelli locked up a brake. Well, that's in fast forward. He doesn't normally jump out of a car just quite so quickly. Looks more like Charlie Chaplin walking across the sand. And there's a sad sight for the Tifosi, one of their treasured and loved Ferraris being hoisted unceremoniously away from that gravel trap to behind the retaining wall. And I would think Ivan Capelli will quickly change and depart Imola with an unfortunate memory of his 1992 Grand Prix here.
Gerhard Berger under pressure from Martin Brundle. Brundle, the middle one of the three cars, we're looking at, of course, being under pressure from Michael Schumacher. But Schumacher doesn't really make any progress in passing Martin Brundle, John. And would it be better maybe for Michael to drop back 50 or 60 meters and then attack again, have a fresh attack on Martin Brundle, because we know that, or Martin knows where Michael is probably quicker and where Michael is attacking at the moment.
Well, we're just going to see what Schumacher can do this time. Well, this is Martin Brundle, in fact, looking forward to Gerhard Berger's car. Now, in qualifying, we saw the Benettons, particularly on Saturday afternoon, were quicker than the McLaren down the straight. The McLaren lost a bit of speed down the straight. I suspect they've been putting a little bit more wing into the car to help the car around the rest of the circuit. But now Schumacher in position, but bad place to try and pass.
Well, Schumacher got in position because Gerhard Berger was slow out of that Tossa corner. Then Martin had to lift off a little bit and Schumacher got very close, but oh boy, does he get close on the braking.
Yeah, Schumacher late onto the brakes, particularly into the downhill Acqua Minerale chicane. But really to no big avail. There's not a great deal of points at that part of the circuit running so close to your teammate, because you lose your momentum. You've got to really wait until that car ahead of you is accelerated. And really in overtaking situations, I would say Schumacher is getting himself rather bogged down, trying to run as close to Martin as he's doing. Ideally, what he would like to do is drop back maybe a second or so and then rethink where he is strong and where Martin is weak, and I suspect Martin is probably the weaker of the two under braking, and then make a charge, and make the charge from before he comes into the chicane, pick up the throttle without having to concentrate on where Martin Brundle's car is, do his own thing, come out of that chicane as hard as he can, really drive the car out, then get your speed and pick up the two through Tamburello, and as you come down to the Villeneuve curve, then try to take advantage of your ability to outbrake your teammate.
Well, the man who picked up the toe at the moment was Martin Brundle, who was nearly in a position to challenge Gerhard Berger. It's Mansell who's leading by 7 seconds from Riccardo Patrese. Ayrton Senna and Gerhard Berger are following him. Then we get the Benetton twins, and that's a battle we're looking at the moment. There's no one making real progress at the moment. It's the Cesaris in 12th, Mauricio Gugelmin in 13th, Eric Gomez is in 14th place, Okio Katayama is 15th, and Gabriele Tarquini, who's moved up from 20th to 16th, Carl Wendlinger, who's in 17th place, then Gianni Morbidelli in the remaining Minardi with a Lamborghini engine, and Bertrand Gachot coming up from being left on the grid to 19th place, and Paul Belmondo is 20th. But Belmondo will be very close to being lapped by Nigel Mansell. He's over 1 minute and 20 seconds behind, and Mansell currently lapping in the 1:28 bracket. His lap or the fastest lap so far in the race being a low 1:27, but it's all the race, it's settling at the moment. And I think, John, in hot weather like this, you sort of charge maybe for the first 10 laps, and then you want to settle yourself, because otherwise you can't go 100% for 60 laps, can you?
Well, really what Williams are doing, the two drivers, Mansell and Patrese, are just consolidating. They're able to run at speeds nobody else can run at, and they can do it more easily. They're not taking as much out of their car. They're certainly not taking very much out of the tyres. And this is the type of domination we've seen throughout the year. But I must say, in this Grand Prix here at Imola, they appear to be even more dominant than they were at any point in the 1992 season. Again, watch Schumacher as he closes the gap to teammate Martin Brundle. Martin, of course, running fairly close to Gerhard Berger, losing out a little bit, but then on the acceleration, back out of the Acqua Minerale corner, everything comes back to status quo. But Schumacher really is the man who's got the advantage on brakes, but what he's got to really attempt is to get the ideal combination of distance between himself and Brundle so that he can pick up the two, but not get interference from the turbulence from Martin Brundle's car as they go through the Tamburello corner. once I think Schumacher can make it past Martin Brundle, and I expect that will happen sooner if not later, then Gerhard Berger is really going to get some attention, because, well, Berger knows how good Schumacher is under braking.
Well, there we see the two Dallara Dallaras with the Ferrari engine chasing Michele Alboreto, and that's the fight for 9th place. The place Alboreto currently holds, and just driving out of your picture was Jerry Boutsen, who's in 8th place. And I think for all of these drivers, for the moment, a fairly good performance, because we haven't seen them this high up yet in this season.
Well, for Boutsen and Alboreto in particular, two fairly senior statesmen in Formula One, and both have had a fairly difficult season in 92 so far. Certainly Boutsen has had the attentions of Eric Komas all over him a lot of the season, and Michele Alboreto really one of the, probably if not the most senior Grand Prix driver these days. Not willing to, apart from Riccardo Patrese, we keep forgetting Riccardo's been around for some 229 Grand Prix, but Michele Alboreto, one of those drivers now in a prudent phase in his career, and not really prepared to go out and hang it out the way someone like Michael Schumacher or other young drivers of the future are prepared to do. But when the car is right, he can still perform, and what we've seen over this weekend are very impressive performances from Michele Alboreto. Really the kind of drives you would have seen in the early and middle 80s when he was in competitive equipment.
Well, we've just finished lap 17 here in Imola, and Nigel Mansell's lap time was a 1:29.917, which was a second slower than Riccardo Patrese's lap time. That could be traffic. It also could indicate we're very close to tyre changes.
Well, we have to see what Williams are going to do. Certainly they've had full advantage of a circuit. Very little traffic. They're not having to race one another. They can pick and choose the line, the braking points. They're not having any aerodynamic disturbance. Absolutely ideal for the two Williams drivers. And really, if they've got a tyre problem at this point in the race, I would be rather surprised, because if they've got a problem, I can't imagine what anybody else would have.
Well, the man starting on C, Jean Alesi, in 7th place, just putting in his fastest lap of the race at 1:29.421. But Jean Alesi some 34 seconds behind the leader of the race, Nigel Mansell. Their second place man, Riccardo Patrese, just lapping one of the Cecil Jordan Yamahas, and that is Stefano Modina's car.
Yes, and just ahead of Riccardo Patrese is Aguri Suzuki. Now, I suspect Suzuki has been an early pit stop for tyres. Suzuki back out on the track. He's dropped off the top 20 leaderboard. So Suzuki may have pushed rather too hard in those early laps. And once again, you know, on the limit tyres, the danger of pushing too hard, sliding the car around, is your tyre temperatures will rise, your tyre pressures rise, and that, of course, will lead to the inevitable blistering. So I suspect that the young Aguri Suzuki, not quite as wily as his teammate Michele Alboreto, just pushed too hard, and that sent him into the pits for a fresh set of rubber.
Riccardo Patrese leading Ayrton Senna by 21.7 seconds, and also I think it's been back, Marcus, because the lap times have gone back to the 1:28 bracket for Nigel Mansell, and then we see Riccardo Patrese being held up by, I suppose, Stefano Modena was a little bit in the way, and maybe Aguri Suzuki as well. Then Ayrton Senna, Gerhard Berger, Martin Brundle, Michael Schumacher and Jean Alesi. Here we see the top 6 on the screen after 18 laps. Nothing's changed so far. And I think we're going to wait for, I think between now and 7 laps we should see some people going into the pits for tyres.
Well, we have had a couple of people in. Certainly Suzuki has been in and had tyres. The question mark really now remains as to whether either of the Benetton drivers, and Schumacher well over the curb on the exit of that Viaranti Alta. That's the name of that particular chicane at the top of the circuit, as they then come down to Ravazza Part 1 and Ravazza Part 2. So whether Schumacher, and a big slide, Schumacher could well have lost the car, and Riccardo Patrese already in the pits. And Michael Schumacher did spin, but he managed to keep the engine going, and he's just about gotten away with that. That was a result for Michael Schumacher today. But I think he's not picking up speed.
I think he's rearranged the left front suspension, John. The left front wheel is definitely got too much toe in.
Well, let's see Michael Schumacher coming into part 2 of the Ravazza. The back steps out, he corrects it. He can't hold it, the car slides backwards across the grass. And looks like the left front's going to biff. Oh yes, pretty substantial biff it was too. And that is the end of Michael Schumacher's day. Martin Brundle continuing in 5th place without the attentions of his teammate Michael Schumacher, who will be in the pits. And well, Michael coming into the pits. The team may be able to effect a repair to the car, but of course even a minor little blow like that to a car can transfer the damage from the wishbone into the chassis. It's unlikely they will try to change it and get the car back out, but certainly they're going to change all 4 wheels and tyres. Here we see it again. That's Martin Brundle, and there's Michael Schumacher pirouetting. That's the first mistake we've seen Schumacher make. Well, the left side, left front got most damage, left rear, slight amount of damage. And maybe something fairly simple like a bent track rod end joint. And there, Guri Suzuki also spinning. That's just about the chicane coming onto the start-finish line. And Suzuki, remember, having had a fresh set of tyres, not doing them very much good by spinning there at that final chicane at the end of a lap.
John, when all that action was happening, Riccardo Patrese was in the pits for, I suspect, a new set of tyres. He did a lap of 1:46.083. He lost some 20 seconds during that pit stop. Of course, he's stationary for much shorter, but he has to get in and out of the pits. So Nigel Mansell's got a huge lead at the moment, and he can even look after his tyres better because he's got nothing to worry about at the moment. Ayrton Senna is 3 seconds behind Riccardo Patrese. Then it's Gerhard Berger, Martin Brundle, and Jean Alesi is in 6th place. And in the points, Jerry Boutsen is 7th, Michele Alboreto 8th, 9th Pierluigi Martini, and in 10th place JJ Leto. Well, there we see Ayrton Senna followed by Gerhard Berger and Martin Brundle. Then a little gap to Jean Alesi. And Martin Brundle, he's been around for a fairly long time. And look at this. I suspect this is a replay, an in-car replay of Michael Schumacher. It is an in-car replay of Michael Schumacher losing it. Well, I thought they were going to play that, but apparently they're not, so we carry on with the race. Carl Wendlinger there, with behind him Nigel Mansell. There we see 20 laps gone, and 26 seconds the difference between Mansell and Riccardo Patrese. A huge, huge gap. But the big question at the moment, has Mansell going to stop for tyres, John?
Well, Riccardo Patrese has just gone and done the fastest lap of the race so far with a 1 minute 27.405, and of course that is entirely due to the fresh tyres. And whether Nigel Mansell needs to make a pit stop or not, we don't know. But of course the cushion of a lead they have over McLaren is sufficient. Join us in a few moments. We'll be back here live from Eurosport.
Actually go very quickly for the first couple of laps on the fresh rubber, but he's now up to speed. So Mansell will no doubt be informed of that, and there it is, captioning the new fastest lap for Riccardo Patrese. Mansell held up in traffic, and I would think this will be the time to come in rather than try and fight his way past. No, he's fighting his way past. He continues on. But remember, he did have a 7 or 8 second advantage before that.
Michael Schumacher is back in the race with a refettled motor car. They've done whatever they needed to do, and now Nigel Mansell is on his 23rd lap on the old tyre, or at least on the tyres he started. There is Patrese coming through in 2nd position, and I'll tell you what the gap is as the Italian completes the lap. Mansell is well on his way, at least 20 seconds ahead. Now, yes, sure enough, Patrese is lapping significantly faster than Nigel Mansell now. The gap has come down from over 25 seconds, from 26 seconds actually, to 23. So Mansell will have to come in for tyres soon. Ayrton Senna is 7.5 seconds behind Patrese that you're looking at now. Berger is 1.7 seconds behind his teammate. Brundle is 5th. Jean Alesi is in 6th position in the Ferrari. And surely Nigel Mansell will come in on this lap. As you watch Patrese coming through to lap Stefano Modena. Now we are with Michael Schumacher. This is it. This is the replay. Michael Schumacher looks right, looks left again. Zonk, bonk, into the tyre barrier, and he gets it going again to limp back to the pits to get his right rear wheel and tyre replaced. And that is the battle. Alboreto 9th, Martini 10th, Later in 11th position, Footwork Mugen, Dallara Ferrari, round the Tosa, up towards the Piratella, and that's Thierry Boutsen in front of them and Mansell into the pits. Now, I wonder how long Nigel Mansell will take for his pit stop compared with that of Riccardo Patrese. He's got plenty of time to just take it nice and easy. Remember what happened in Portugal when last year Nigel Mansell lost the race because of a faulty tyre stop. That's a long stop, 9 seconds, but there was no need for him to hurry. But Riccardo Patrese is coming through to complete the lap. And Nigel Mansell is on his way, and the gap between them now is 4.5 seconds. They're both on fresh rubber. There is Mansell. There in the background is Patrese.
And Mansell looks as if he's got just enough space to get his tyres warmed up. Remember, you've got to feel your way onto a new...
Riccardo Patrese is some 4.5 seconds behind Nigel Mansell. In fact, it's less than that on the road as we look at it. But Nigel will not be very long, I can assure you, to getting back up onto pace. And Patrase's pit stop came at a point in the race, lap 18 or so, that gave the team the opportunity to see what the difference would be between Patrese getting held up rather there by Belmondo. So the team were able to then make a decision at what point Mansell should come in and not lose the lead. But I tell you, it was a close call because Patrase's lap speeds were some 2 seconds a lap quicker at that particular time than Nigel Mansell. And although the Imola pit lane is probably the quickest one in Formula One, well, here we have Martin Brundle in now. Let's see what Michael Schumacher back in again. Or is this a repeat of what we saw a few moments ago? And Michael Schumacher spun off the track, hit the tyre wall with the left side of the car. So they're trying to rectify the damage to the left front of Schumacher's car. And either was a bent wishbone, more than likely a bent steering arm.
So Mansell leading Riccardo Patrese by 2.5 seconds. So that means Mansell lost quite a lot of time during that pit stop. And Ayrton Senna currently in 3rd place, Gerhard Berger in 4th, and this is a replay of Schumacher.
Well, he's got good flexibility in his neck, that's one thing for sure, but bang, you could see that little impact just enough because when the car backed into the wall, the front then swung into it. That damaged the front suspension of the front steering arm on the left-hand side. And that brought Michael Schumacher into the pits, and effectively the end of proceedings for Michael Schumacher here at Imola. Well, poor Nigel Mansell having to go the long way around Olivier Grillard. Grillard once again leaving the mirrors of his car at home.
It's Riccardo Patrese having to go the long way around. But I suppose Mansell had to go the long way around earlier on, and we just saw Michael Schumacher's car being pushed back into the garage, so he'll be out of this race. The first retirement for the young German of the year.
Well, Mansell coming up to the completion of his first flying lap. Remember that lap that we saw on our monitor here was taken from him leaving the pits. So Mansell, I suspect, probably clipping into the low 127s in this first lap on fresh tyres. 127.035, you can't get much lower than that. And that was the signal to Riccardo Patrese to say, well, that's as close as I'm going to get to the lead of the 1992 Imola Grand Prix. Well, Martin Brundle now, in fact, in the pit lane. The remaining Benetton Ford coming in for a fresh set of tyres. And somebody went past the pits there and sounded like a major missed gear. But a good pit stop for Brundle, in and out, 8.35 seconds. There is the Fond Metal. That we suspect was the car that went past and made that rather rude noise. I suspect there's probably parts of Conrod piston and crankshaft lying somewhere around the track at that point. And there's another blow up. Gianni Morbidelli, his V12 Lamborghini engine blowing smoke out of the left bank. And unfortunately that Ferrari red flag, well there it now is. Bit of a Torrey Canyon water and oil gushing out of the back of the car, pulling across right onto the line. Nice one, Johnny. Everybody's going to love you for that.
Well, Gianni Morbidelli pulling off the track. He retires on lap 26 out of 60. And Nigel Mansell just being able to go round Gianni Morbidelli there to complete lap number 26. And he still has a lead over his teammate Riccardo Patrese. It was 4.15 seconds, it's now 5.3 seconds, and he is consistently quicker than Riccardo Patrese. And there Ayrton Senna in the pit.
Well, Senna really just cruising along in third place under no threat from Gerhard Berger in fourth. Good stop from the McLaren. Oh, Ayrton almost lost it, but a very, very good stop. One of the best that we have seen from the Marlboro McLaren Honda team. But of course, really very academic, because still in the fifth Grand Prix, the two Williams Renaults utterly dominant. Jean Alesi now in fifth place, about to put a lap. You see in car here, coming up the hill through that very nice Terratella corner. Double left hand to the second part downhill, changing to fifth gear, then down all the way into third gear. Right over the curbs, left over the curbs, then right, and then the final part of Aqua Minerale exiting on the curbs. And Jean Alesi with that characteristic high-held steering wheel position. Oops. Well, Jean very much more controlled than we've seen him all weekend. And he's had a lot of talking to, both from the team and from the FISA officials, to try and, let's say, detune some of his enthusiasm.
Well, while we look at Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi in the background, Nigel Mansell, Riccardo Patrese, both have had a pit stop. Gerhard Berger was in third place, but he's now going into the pits for his pit stop. Jean Alesi is now in third place, but he said he was on the harder C compound tire, so we don't expect Jean to make a pit stop. Then Ayrton Senna and Martin Brundle, 5.97.
Another stunning performance from McLaren, two in a row, and well, you have to see just quite where that places Berger in relation to teammate Senna. Certainly Jean Alesi now running in third, Senna fourth, some 9 seconds behind Jean Alesi. He has the benefit of fresh tyres. Well, we've seen Alesi in the past go through full race distance without a pit stop. And certainly one race that he very nearly won in 1991 was in Spa, when he again chose a different setup to everybody else, and it nearly came right for him. But here Ayrton Senna currently running in fourth place. Gerhard Berger in fifth, and there's about 5 seconds or so between the two McLarens. And really they'll be focusing and getting back up to third and fourth, looking for as many points, both from driver and constructors' points of view. And Martin Brundle right now back to where he was with Gerhard Berger.
And the new fastest lap for Nigel Mansell. For the first time, he's in the 1:26 bracket, 1:26.783 for Nigel Mansell, and that was on lap 28 when he did that. We're nearly halfway during this San Marino Grand Prix here at Imola. Riccardo Patrese now some 8 seconds behind. Alesi 17.5 seconds behind Riccardo Patrese. Then it is Ayrton Senna, 8 seconds behind. Then Gerhard Berger. Martin Brundle is in 6th place, and that's the last point. 7th, Thierry Boutsen. 8th, Michele Alboreto. 9th, Pierluigi Martini. 10th is JJ Leto. 11th, Mauricio Guzman.
Well, very shortly we expect to have Gerhard Berger with his mirrors full of green, blue and yellow of Martin Brundle. Brundle was able to close in the earlier laps before the pit stops up to Gerhard Berger. Didn't quite have enough speed at that particular point to pull out of the slipstream and pass him down into the Tossa hairpin bend. In fact, Brundle probably feeling he wants to be more prudent than anything else, looking for a finish today.
Well, the completion of lap 29, and the race is settled now very definitely into a pattern. Mansell in the 1:27, so is his teammate Riccardo Patrese, but the battle is definitely on behind them. It's Ayrton Senna and then Gerhard Berger and Martin Brundle trying to close that gap and wrench that 4th place off of Gerhard Berger. Sorry, 5th place.
Well, Ayrton Senna now just 6.5 seconds behind John Alesi and running some 2 seconds a lap faster than Alesi. So really, in the next 3 laps, the situation for Ayrton Senna and John Alesi will be over, bar the shouting. And really, when you're running some 2 seconds off the pace, it becomes self-explanatory, and why John Alesi would choose not to come into the pits would be beyond me. The pit's certainly able to talk to Alesi and advise him that he is losing that amount of time per lap, and of course now he's being held up by footwork and one of the March cars. Berger coming through the chicane, followed by Martin Brundle. And all these leading cars now running in the 1 minute 27 second bracket, with the exception of John Alesi.
Well, that footwork is Aguri Suzuki, who's right behind Paul Belmondo. Suzuki, who was a top 10 runner very early in the race, but then dropped out. At a quick visit to the pits, he had a spin, and now he's around 20th place at the moment, fighting with Paul Belmondo. But there we see Senna, Berger and Brundle.
Well, Suzuki was very generous. He pulled well over to the left and let John Alesi go through. Alesi currently in 3rd spot, looking to lose as little time as he possibly can. He's now got Paul Belmondo ahead of him. That'll not be a problem to get past. And then it will be Ayrton Senna. Well, there's looks like one of the Jordans and one of the Ligiers. So that must be
Comas and Gugelmin, because they were only half a second apart. So I suppose those two have touched each other. Mauricio Gugelmin was in 11th place. Eric Comas was in 12th place. And they were together, running together, so maybe they went off together, but we hope to get a clearer picture of that in a minute.
Looks more than coincidence. 2 cars off the side of the track like that indicates a little bit of contact, but this man certainly in contact with his Ferrari, John Alesi. The only leading runner not to have a pit stop, and really beginning to pay the penalty of not doing so. Still running, well, in fact his last lap was 1 minute 31.175, but that was due to the traffic. He got held up. He was behind Suzuki and Belmondo, but now he's clear. He'll probably drop straight back into the low 1 minute 29s. But there you can see 4th place man really very close indeed, Ayrton Senna. And it'll not be a big problem for Senna to get past Suzuki or Belmondo. The red and white nose of Ayrton Senna's car, very intimidating in anybody's mirrors in a Grand Prix. Puts the fear of God into anybody who he gets close to. So expect Senna to be gaining ground all the time.
Well, but Senna now behind Aguri Suzuki and Paul Belmondo. And I think Suzuki sort of takes advantage of that situation by taking Paul Belmondo, but Gerhard Berger is close right up with Ayrton Senna, who was waving at Aguri Suzuki. And I think the shot we just saw of the Ligier and the Jordan, John, I don't know where that came from, but still Thierry Boutsen, Mauricio Gugelmin, Eric Comas and Stefano Modena are in the race.
Yes, well, Gerhard Berger had the door well and truly shut on him, and Berger had to run very, very wide on the exit. Up at the Peratella, not a place you want to fall off. Very unforgiving if you get over the curbs. In the meantime, Alesi battling away in 3rd place, doing the best he can.
Well, Alesi actually just putting up his fastest lap of the race, which was faster than Ayrton Senna's lap. So maybe he was held up earlier on, John.
Yes, the difference in the C and the D tyre is that, let's say after about 6 or so laps, theoretically both tyres begin to perform about the same level in terms of lap time and grip. So Alesi was really looking for that window where he had to consolidate, having had the 2 McLarens change tyres, make up ground very quickly, then get back with the program. Well, there we see Gugelmin and Comas both running again. So quite what's going on, we're not too entirely sure.
Well, maybe it was a shot of the spare cars, and there's a part of a car very definitely lying on the track.
That's a car in the wall. Somebody has lost it in the biggest way in the Tamburello.
On the right,
yes.
It is Tarquini's car that stopped earlier on. This car, I think, is on the left, John.
Well, I think that's a car backwards into the wall in the Tamburello. The yellow flags are certainly out. They weren't out there for Tarquini. So maybe we can have a look and see what happens. But certainly it looks to me like the bodywork of either one of the Minardis or one of the Ferraris The yellow flag certainly being waved.
On the right.
Yes, there's a car. Yeah, red and dark blue, or red and black.
Well, on the right, that's very definitely the front metal colours, but I think there is a car on the left, or maybe someone just lost a part of the bodywork. Well, Nigel Mansell now 12 seconds ahead. Oh dear, someone running across the track, but at least that part of the car is now gone, and it's very hard to see. I think the skid marks we see there were Riccardo Patresi's skid marks from last week. In all honesty,
well, there's a very, very courageous Marshall indeed. The closing speed of Mansell's Williams probably something like 180, 190 miles an hour. Now let's see what the cause was.
Something flying off the LaRousse.
Looks like the cover that, well, there's Gashew in the sand trap, and I wonder was it Gashew's car the bodywork that we saw flying off came from. It looked like the panel that was on top of the damper spring unit, which were mounted on top of the driver's legs. So Gashew, Bertrand Gashew, well and truly out in the sand trap at the Tossa hairpin. Nigel Mansell continues happily on his way, some 47 minutes into this Grand Prix here in San Marino.
And we're halfway already. Well, we knew it was going to be a fast Grand Prix, but Nigel Mansell, the 1:27.133 on his last lap there. Bertrand Gashew walking back to the pit. And Nigel starting his 35th lap out of 60. 1:28.151, and undoubtedly that was because he had to slow down a little for that Marshall running across the track. Mansell leading, Riccardo Patrese, then Alesi and Senna, Berger and Brundle. That's the top 6 here at Imola. Rejoin us after the little break together with about 200,000 Italians here at Imola.
Got just fallen off somebody's car. The red car parked on the right was probably Capelli's Ferrari. So it would appear that bit of bodywork, somebody will have a look for somebody with something missing.
And watch Senna, you're watching him now. He is within 2 seconds of third position. Jean Alesi in the Ferrari with the yellow flashes, and behind Ayrton Senna is his teammate Gerhard Berger. And it looks as though Jean Alesi will have to come in. He's going to be caught, he's going to be passed by the 2 McLarens, which will go up to 3rd and 4th. And in 6th position, it's still Martin Brundle, lap 35.
Well, I think Alesi's going to try and stay out. His lap times, he's slowly chipping away, and he's going quicker. So his tyres are obviously currently in good shape. Maybe on the harder compound. McLaren, well, certainly Senna was running a mix. He was running the harder C's on the right, softer D's on the left-hand side of the car. And they're only hauling Alesi in slowly, and we know that Alesi, particularly recently, has developed the ability to make his car very wide. Brundle will testify to that, particularly in Brazil, but of course with a long straight here, passing is a lot more feasible. A little bit of puff of dust there thrown up by Gerhard Berger as he just hooked it on the curb. No problem doing that.
And he's coming up to Alesi's coming up to catch and lap de Cesaris, but Ayrton Senna took 0.6 of a second. That's over half a second out of Alesi's third position on the previous lap, and if he keeps that up, he's going to be with the Frenchman very soon. We're on lap 36 now, and it's still Mansell, Patrese, Alesi, Senna, Berger, Brundle, as that caption informs you, and you can see there is 4.
After 35 laps, the standings, the top 6, Nigel Mansell, Riccardo Patrese still leading by a long, long way. And then there's this battle. Jean Alesi, Ayrton Senna and Gerhard Berger. They're all fighting for third place, and this is getting closer and closer. And someone like Olivier Grouillard should really get out of Jean Alesi's way in a minute. Otherwise, the Frenchman could be in trouble.
Well, he's never been guilty of doing that in the past. But Jean Alesi is very forceful, and he will... If he can't get past with ease, he'll do it the hard way. And of course, Alesi is the only man in the top 6 who's not had a pit stop for tyres. He told us before the race started he hoped he could go the entire race distance on one set of C Goodyear tyres. And whether the wisdom of that decision will bear out at the end of the race or not. Well, the McLarens are bearing down on him very quickly. And here really is the moment of tension for Jean Alesi with Grillard ahead of him. And that is the worst possible scenario that Alesi could have, because Senna now will be able to pick up the toe. And as they exit Tamburello corner, pull out from behind Jean Alesi, come alongside him, coming down into the Villeneuve curve and into the Tosa hairpin bend. Of course, Grillard's car probably quicker down the straight than Jean Alesi. Look at that. Alesi can do nothing with him, but Senna... Well, Alesi just blocked blatantly. Grillard pulling over to the right, but not really giving way now. That is fairly typical, I have to say, of Olivier Grillard. He's not assisting. And Ayrton Senna having to go the long way around. Gerhard Berger getting through. Finally, Grillard conceding what he ought to have done probably before he got to the Tosa hairpin. Team manager Cantero, of course, I think is fairly bullish in instructing his drivers to let everybody else find their own way around you. Well, that's all right in situations where nothing important's happening, but this is the main battle for third position in the Grand Prix, and I would have liked to see a Grillard being more cooperative to these three cars.
We're looking at the fight for third place. Jean Alesi, Ayrton Senna and Gerhard Berger. Behind that, about 5 seconds behind this trio, is Martin Brundle in 6th place. In the sole surviving Benetton Ford, we saw Michael Schumacher spin off earlier on in this race. After Martin Brundle comes Michele Alboreto, Pierluigi Martini, JJ Leto, and in 10th place, Mauricio Gugelmin.
Well, Jean Alesi maintaining his momentum. Ayrton Senna, Gerhard Berger, of course, they got delayed also on that lap by Grillard, so expect to see Ayrton Senna and Gerhard Berger begin to put more pressure onto the Frenchman in the Ferrari. But Jean Alesi is nothing but a fighter. He didn't give up in Barcelona in appalling conditions. He had 2 little contacts during the race which resulted in spins. He had a pit stop for fresh tyres, and he still made it onto the podium. And the spirit of this little Frenchman from Avignon, via Sicilian parentage, courage of a lion, heart of a lion, or maybe some people would say the old prancing horse. The team that he drives for, which is based not more than 40 kilometers down the road, and the Tifosi here supporting him 100%. And this is what they like to see in their drivers at Ferrari. They like to see spirit, and Jean Alesi's got plenty of that.
Nigel Mansell's lead at the moment is 16.3 seconds, a long way, and it's a very good fight here for third, Ayrton Senna and Gerhard Berger. And well, there's not really anything Ayrton Senna can do. Maybe, John, would it be possible that the softer D-compound tyres that Ayrton's using maybe have gone off already?
Well, the danger with putting on new tyres is that you instantly get more grip, so you push very hard, and you use that tyre very hard in its early life. The consequence is you might have used it just too hard. You might have just overheated it or got the temperature to rise too quickly. The tyre pressure may have risen too high, and you could be into a blistering situation. Unlike Jean Alesi, who's been on his one set of tyres throughout the race, those tyres are comfortably cured. They're working well, they're very consistent. And really, Alesi's managed to stem the flood of the 2 McLarens towards him. We're on the 39th lap. There's only 21 laps of this race left. And it is quite possible that the McLaren pair have shot their bolts.
Well, there we look at the other cars with Ferrari engines. Pierluigi Martini just in front of teammate JJ Leto, and that's the fight for 8th place. And both cars in the top 10. I don't think the team would have expected that if you asked them yesterday afternoon. And if we look at Jean Alesi's lap times, then we can see that he just put in another fastest lap for himself. But these two, Pierluigi Martini and JJ Leto, both very talented drivers, both very quick, and both trying to get that Dallara with the Ferrari engine to work.
Well, I suspect that Leto is the quicker of the two today, because really he's able to close up but not get past. And Pierluigi Martini, of course, racing in Italy, not wanting to concede anything to his teammate. Pride within the team, probably sometimes greater than the desire to win a race. Well, there we see Ayrton Senna finally alongside John O'Lazy, but who's going to be last on the brakes? Well, Senna had the line.
Oh, and Gerhard Berger trying to go through at the same time, and
oh, dear me. Well, Jean O'Lazy refused to give up, refused to concede to Gerhard Berger, tried to go around the corner, around the outside, got the tail out, the car took a bite, came in, clipped the right rear of Gerhard Berger's McLaren, both cars out of the race, damaged suspension to Gerhard Berger's car, and what a sad end to a fine drive by both those drivers. Well, that was John O'Lazy's tenacity, utterly refusing to give up ground to anybody. He had to do it to Ayrton Senna. Senna made the perfect play. Gerhard Berger tried to take advantage. O'Lazy just slams the door, cars interlocking wheels, and then finally front right and Berger left rear, and then you see what happens. O'Lazy still keeps his foot planted to the floor, clobbers the right rear of Gerhard Berger's McLaren, wipes the nose off his Ferrari, carbon fibre shattered everywhere in the racetrack, and a very sad end indeed. Well, Gerhard Berger's car beached. Look at that, that's water coming from the overflow system on the engine, just pumping superheated water out of the back of the Ferrari. The marshal realizing it's pretty hot as well. We need a bit of swift work here to get Berger's car out of the way. And really now, Gerhard Berger and Jean O'Lazy probably staying away from each other as much as possible, because I'm sure one will want to crown the other. A totally unnecessary incident from both drivers. Gerhard went for the gap, but I have to say both of them could have avoided that situation.
Well, that results in Ayrton Senna being third at the moment, Martin Brundle being fourth. In fifth place, we should be waiting for Michele Alboreto. In sixth place, then Pierluigi Martini. Seventh, JJ Leto. Eighth, Mauricio Gugelmin. Ninth, Eric Gomez. And 10th, Andrea de Cesaris. And there we get confirmation of that situation with, I think, a fairly happy Dallara team at the moment in the pits. And there we see it on the screen. Ayrton Senna, Martin Brundle, Michele Alboreto and Pierluigi Martini on course for 1 point. And right behind those two, it's Mauricio Gugelmin.
Well, unfortunately, there's no crane at this part of the circuit to drag Gerhard Berger's McLaren out of the way. Of course, that right rear suspension collapsed the car, the bottom of the car, the underbody of the car on the ground. So we've got 7 marshals now trying to drag the car to safety onto the grass up against the retaining wall. In the meantime, Ayrton Senna now about to put a lap on Andrea de Cesaris. De Cesaris down in 11th place. In fact, well, he's now up to 9th because of that incident with Jean O'Lazy and Gerhard Berger. And Mauricio Gugelmin currently in 8th. This is the best performance we've seen so far this year from either of the Jordan Yamahas, and Eddie Jordan, I'm sure, along with everybody else in the Jordan pits, keeping everything crossed they can to get this car to the finish.
And I think we saw Eric Gomez spin at Tosa just now. There we see, and Okio Katayama, who also spun off. So a lot of cars parked there. Oguri Suzuki coming past, and this car is trapped on the curbing, and it's going to be towed either forward or backwards, and he's lost his engine cover.
Well, that was probably the engine cover that we saw on the track with a bit of bodywork. I suspect it's only half of the engine cover. It's not the entire cover. I think if you see the left-hand side of the car, you'll find that the other part of the engine cover is intact. But now we're getting one of the wreckers being driven up from the sand trap to try and take Katayama's Venturi LaRousse Lamborghini away to safety. And that's not a very nice moment, because no competitor on the racetrack wants to see the wreckers anywhere near it. And there's one of the 2 marchers in the pits getting a fresh set of tyres. Finally, and here we have a repeat of what took place. See Eric, and that's Terry Boots and the Gomez
spinning, and I suppose Okio Katayama spinning when he came round the corner and saw Gomez. But there's also a lot of water on that track, John. I don't know where it came from. There's a lot of water running across the track at Tosa at the moment. So that is probably why people are spinning off, because also Nigel Mansell had a bit of a moment coming round there.
Well, that could be the legacy of the shunt with Berger and O'Lazy. Certainly there's a lot of water coming out of the back of Berger's car when the engine stopped, but I suspect there's something more than that, because that's quite a long way up from the exit of the corner. In the meantime, JJ Leto are about to have a lap put on him. Pierluigi Martini, in fact, Leto having just been lapped. Oh yes, a lot of water indeed. Well, that may well be the water from Katayama's car, unless, well, I can't see where it's coming from. There's no car that was stopped at that part of the circuit. But certainly a lot of water, a lot of fluid, whichever it is, oil, water, just at the apex of the Tossa hairpin bend.
Now we can see how quick JJ Leto is, because Pierluigi Martini was quite a long way ahead when he got lapped by Nigel Mansell, and there JJ Leto sort of picking up his teammate to challenge his teammate again for that last point. And Mauricio Gruziman being 47 seconds behind JJ Leto, so he's got nothing to worry about behind him. Andrea de Cesaris is closing in on Gruziman, and behind them we have Olivier Grouillard, Eric Gomez and Oguri Suzuki.
Well, it's unusual here at Imola. Normally we have a very high retirement rate due to mechanical unreliability, but today the biggest cause of retirement rate has been driver error. And we've seen cars falling off, colliding, spinning. So whether that's a function of the temperature, more as a result of the car's handling and tyre condition, but there have been some fairly fundamental errors, and not least of all that between Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi. Certainly Alesi refusing to concede ground to Gerhard Berger in the corner. And of course the outcome is both of the cars now out of the race.
Well, we see the places 7 to 12. JJ Leto, Mauricio Gruziman and the rest. And of course all of these drivers being one lap down on leader Nigel Mansell. The last one to be unlapped is Michele Alboreto, who's on the same lap as Nigel Mansell, but Pierluigi Martini is the first one to be lapped. And then Carl Wendlinger in 13th place is 2 laps down on the Williams. Red night, or as we could say, John, a good day for the Mansellistes.
Yes, all the Mansell fans around the world will be absolutely delighted to see so far in the race, and we're on the 45th lap, that's the 2 Williams maintaining the pace, but the reliability that we've seen so far this year. And really, people like McLaren, Ferrari, Benetton, who've been the principal challengers to Williams, and remember they're all running effectively 1992 cars. I'm wondering, what are we going to do to beat this Williams car, this Williams team? And the situation in the championship, assuming things remain as they are, will give Mansell an even bigger lead in the championship than we saw Ayrton Senna at a similar point in the championship last year. And Martin Brundle and their sole remaining Benetton Ford currently in 4th place. And he's some 5 seconds behind Ayrton Senna in 3rd.
Well, John, I mean, Nigel Mansell extending his lead in that World Championship is one thing, but what about Williams Renault extending their lead in the Constructors' World Championship?
Well, the two things are inseparable. Let's have a look at here Mauricio Gruziman with the Yamaha V12, how it compares in acceleration and straight line performance against the Ford V8. Remember, that's the engine that Jordan had last year, and they're very, very successful first year in Formula One, and one has to say that the Ford's all over the Yamaha like a rash. And Martin pulls out, passes Mauricio Gruziman without any difficulty whatsoever. And well, Yamaha, a lot of work to do both on the reliability and performance stakes before they can return to the happy hunting grounds they had last year. In the meantime, our Nige cruises on serenely.
Completed.
Well, in spite of the very high temperatures today, this race is really a doddle for both the Williams drivers. And when I expect to see Nigel and Patrese on the winners' podium. Probably they'll be barely out of breath by the time. They'll probably be out of breath more from climbing the podium than they will be from the Grand Prix itself. And that's the beauty of having a car like this. When the car is helping you, and you are not having to carry it, it makes winning Grand Prix, well, just ever so easy.
And look at those grandstands. Well, the unofficial Italian estimate is over 200,000 people here. Well, maybe it's a lot of people anyway here at Imola for the 5th Grand Prix of the 1992 season. And it's been Nigel Mansell from start to, well, up till lap 47 now, and there's Jean Alesi running back to the pits, and he hasn't stopped. It's just the tape that stopped, and you're looking at Ayrton Senna. Senna going very slowly through that Tossa hairpin. The water still on the track. Well, I still don't know where it came from. It's a very interesting bit of water running across the track there at Tossa, but Ayrton unable to do anything about the two Williams ahead of him. He's 50 seconds behind Nigel Mansell, and a good 23 behind Riccardo Patrese. And then Martin Brundle is 8 seconds behind Ayrton Senna. And I think John Martin Brundle, 4th place, a good solid performance so far.
Yeah, Martin really doesn't seem to be able to have enough speed to draw him up to Ayrton Senna's 3rd place. And now at this stage in the race, on the 48th lap, I think Martin will be deciding that if he can get 4th place today, he will take those 3 points, his first points of the season, and be very thankful for them as well. Really driven a very fine race so far. He had a lot of pressure from his teammate Michael Schumacher in the early part of the race, and Schumacher made a fundamental error coming out of the second part of the Rovazza corner, ended up on the tire wall and out of the race.
Well, Michele Alboreto overtaking Carl Wendlinger. Carl Wendlinger, who has a problem, I assume, because he's slower than teammate Paul Belmondo, and Wendlinger is the faster of the two drivers. And of course, Michele Alboreto on course for another points finish in the Footwork Mugen.
Yes, and he's about to catch up and lap his teammate Aguri Suzuki. Suzuki down in 12th. Suzuki had an early pit stop for tyres. He then had a spin at this chicane. You see Alboreto coming through now. So there is life in that old Alboreto dog yet. And for Footwork Mugen Honda, really the beginning of the fulfillment of the promise that V10 Mugen Honda engine always was going to provide the team with. It's really taken them the first 4 Grand Prix of the 92 season to understand the engine itself. Remember, that is quite a large engine by the standards of V10 engines in Formula One. It's also quite heavy, and the weight is very high up in the engine, and it's also rearward in the engine. So in fact, in terms of ultimate configuration, it's not particularly good, but it does have a lot of horsepower. But just looking at that water running across the track, I wonder, is there some form of plumbing that has gone wrong? Because the water seems to be a stream. It's not water from a car, it's water that is constantly flowing, and maybe some plumbing somewhere under the surface of the track has got fractured. Let's see, Ayrton Senna going across it. Yeah, a lot of water there. I mean, that is water that is running across from right to left. Not particularly fun to drive through because you've got hot, dry slicks going through fairly cool, damp water, probably about 3 feet wide, that wet patch. So ready to catch the unwary. And that may well have been what caught out Katayama and Comas some 8 or so laps ago. There'll be a stationary red and yellow flag down at the Tossa indicating fluid. Normally it refers to oil on the track, but in this case very much water. But of course everyone alerted to it, but sometimes drivers get a little bit complacent when a flag has been out for a long time. They tend to forget that there is something there, but that is water running across the track, and I suspect the plumbing at Tossa is fractured. Now somebody might well go and try and find the stopcock and turn it off, but that might be difficult with some 50 or so thousand people down at Tossa just to lay your hand on it.
Nigel Mansell on his 50th lap out of 60. Riccardo Patrese 14.9 seconds behind him. And then in 3rd place still Ayrton Senna, who's just crossed the line, 33 seconds behind Riccardo Patrese and 48 seconds behind Nigel Mansell. In 4th place, Martin Brundle, then Michele Alboreto and Pierluigi Martini, who has the last point for the Scuderia Italia in that Dallara Ferrari. And Martin Brundle without that speedometer on the dash.
Yes, it seems only Schumacher's car has got the speed readout as well as a G meter. In fact, I think that water flow is getting worse. It looks to me to be getting broader at the point of the apex of the corner. And we've seen Ayrton Senna, Nigel Mansell and now Martin Brundle beginning to take quite a lot of care as they go through that. Brundle's car seems not to have, certainly on the same part of the cockpit anyway, those two interesting little readouts which we were able to look over the shoulder of Michael Schumacher's car. And this corner here, the Tamburello pulling 2.6 lateral G. And then as he came down to the hairpin bend at the end of the straight, the Tosa getting 3.06 G under braking. So if you add together the weight of Michael Schumacher's head, and I don't want to speculate just how heavy that is, and the weight of his helmet multiplied by 3, and that's just one corner times 61 laps, so you can imagine the kind of loads and forces that are being imposed upon drivers, plus the temperature. Well, 10 laps to go, and Michele Alboreto about to lap Aguri Suzuki. Probably Suzuki really not very anxious to be lapped by his teammate, and I think Michele Alboreto himself probably won't force the issue too much. He thinks there's not going to be a lot of cooperation from Suzuki.
Leto is 7th. Andrea De Cesaris going well in the Tyrrell Ilmore is in 8th position, and you're looking actually at the two footwork Mugans together. So in 11th position is Eric Comas, followed by Suzuki. So there are the two footwork Mugen cars together.
Yes, and Suzuki is a lap down on Alboreto, and Alboreto will be keen that Suzuki doesn't hold him up, because there are his pursuers just behind the two Dallaras, and that battle is very much on. Patrese goes through as well. He won't be too worried about hurrying past the traffic. He'll be quite relaxed about that at this stage of the race. He's got plenty of time, half a minute on Senna.
You're watching Martini, now you're watching Patrese taking JJ Leto, who is 7th, but Pierluigi Martini, about 3.5 seconds behind Michele Alboreto, is going for 5th, and the Dallara Ferrari is proving to be reliable. Riccardo Patrese, the winner here in San Marino in 1990, and he was actually leading for Brabham one year at the spot that you're looking at now, and he went off, and the crowd in the grandstand that you're looking at there stood up and erupted with joy, because although Riccardo Patrese, an Italian, had been leading the San Marino Grand Prix, his forcible retirement meant that Patrick Tambay took over in the Ferrari, and it was more important to them that a Ferrari led than an Italian driver. Nigel Mansell leads here. He completes his 52nd lap, so he has got 8 to go, including the one that he's on, between himself and his 5th successive record-breaking, if it happens, victory at the beginning of a Grand Prix season. It's by no means a record of all time, because Alberto Ascari actually... Oh, my goodness! Who is that holding up Nigel Mansell? It's surprise, surprise! It's Olivier Griard. Now, Griard has got this reputation for getting in the way. Well, you saw it, James. What's your expert opinion?
Well, Ken Tyrrell assures me that...
The 1992 San Marino Grand Prix at Imola, and I think John has some comments about Olivier Griard.
Well, just before we came back from the commercial break, we saw Nigel Mansell trying to lap Griard for the second time, and it was absolutely ridiculous. I have to say that what Griard sometimes does on the racetrack is ridiculous. He had the leader of the race lapping him for the second time. He had every opportunity to pull over, let him go through, let that is Mansell go through. He would not have lost any time. It was in this section of circuit up into that double left-hand Tiratello corner. He did not concede. He had blue flags being waved at him, and frankly, I would have him in, fine him, and give him, well, whatever the equivalent to a yellow or red card is in Formula One these days.
Ayrton Senna still in 3rd place, some 51 seconds behind Nigel Mansell, still race leader. and losing some time, about 3 seconds, trying to pass Olivier Crouillard. Now, the interesting thing we're going to hope the director will try and find is Michele Alboreto, Pierluigi Martini and JJ Leto, because they're all fairly close, and Michele Alboreto is 4 seconds ahead of Pierluigi Martini, who's half a second ahead of JJ Leto, so we might have a nice little fight developing there. They're a very lonely 4th place at the moment for Martin Brundle, who's ahead of that battle I was just talking about. Andrea de Cesaris has overtaken Mauricio Guzman for 8th spot, and 10th still is Olivier Crouillard. 11th, Eric Gomez. 12th, Aguri Suzuki. 13th, Carl Wendlinger. And 14th and last is Paul Belmondo, with some 14 cars in the race, still with about 7 laps to go.
Well, Martin Brundle is the next car. Nigel Mansell will lap, but he's got to make up something like 25 to 30 seconds before he could do that to his friend and colleague, fellow Englishman, Martin Brundle. And we're on the 54th lap, so there's probably little prospect Martin will be able to complete full race distance, I predict. There is the principal battle, the two Dallara Ferraris, and they're chasing as hard as they can. Michele Alboreto in 5th place in the leading footwork Honda Mugen Hondas, whichever way you care to call it. Leto and Martini have been battling throughout this Grand Prix. There's never been more than a couple of seconds between them, but JJ never managing to quite gain the momentum and take himself past his teammate. And again, this is the part of the circuit where really he wants to be much closer to Martini. And maybe the difference in the setup of the two cars is such that Martini's gone for straight line speed and JJ's gone for slightly more downforce to give him that thrust out of the slower corners. Anyway, here we have the two red cars. Ironically, the two only Ferrari engine cars remaining in the race. We saw earlier in the race Ivan Capelli ending up on the sand trap, and then we saw a few laps ago Gerhard Berger and John Alesi disputing who had the right to toss a hairpin, and the outcome was both cars are out of the race. John Alesi basically refusing utterly to concede his 4th place to Gerhard Berger. Berger interlocking wheels with Alesi, and of course then both cars finally had solid contact and both ended their Sunday afternoon run off the track at the Tossa, the exit of the Tossa hairpin.
Nigel Mansell finishing his 55th lap. He's got 5 laps to go to the end of this Grand Prix, and I don't see anything but mechanical failure stopping Nigel for not only his 26th Grand Prix victory, but also his 5th Grand Prix victory in a row, and no one has ever won the first 5 Grand Prix of the year. And John, these are the Ferrari fans. Well, no Ferraris in the race anymore, so they've decided to go home.
Well, they can cheer the two Scuderia Italia Dallara Ferraris, but that's not quite the same thing as cheering the real Ferrari team. But just really to reinforce Mansell's domination of the 1992 season. While everybody else is running in the high 28, low 29, he's just thrown in 1 minute 27.425 laps. And remember, that's with a big wet patch now running across the Tossa hairpin bend. So Nigel just amusing himself, trying to really keep his concentration alive. The danger when you're in such a strong position is that you could lull yourself into a false sense of concentration. So he's just getting on with the program and picking up speed. But really it's been absolutely a perfect race so far for Mansell. Riccardo Patrese probably having to work a little bit harder than Nigel. We're not getting quite the same breaks and traffic that Nigel has had. But nonetheless, an absolutely perfect job from Riccardo Patrese, consolidating his teammate and leader, Nigel Mansell. Again, helping the Williams team in their points challenge in the Constructors' Championship. And of course, consolidating his 2nd place in the championship. Currently, he's got 18 points in 2nd place, and another 6 points today will give him 24. But Nigel Mansell, team leader, almost double that with 50 if the results are as they are now. Mansell first, Patrese second. Ayrton Senna looking for a further 4 points to give him 8. And Ayrton Senna's thoughts really must be beginning to think that his championship opportunities are evaporating by the race. It's going to take something remarkable and very special indeed from the Marlboro McLaren Honda team to rescue the 1992 championship for the current champion Ayrton Senna. And of course what will happen as a result of this, the more Williams win, the greater the speculation is going to be in the pit lane as to what will happen regarding the drivers and driver changes for 1993.
Well, the silly season about to start, I suppose, with rumours of who goes where for next year. But we now know that Nigel Mansell is on his 58th lap, 3 laps to go, and he's done a 1:29.458, probably taking it nice and easy. Riccardo Patrese 20.3 seconds behind his team leader. Michele Alboreto is still in 5th place. He's 1 lap down, and on the same lap as Nigel Mansell are still Ayrton Senna and Martin Brundle. Pierluigi Martini in 6th, JJ Leto in 7th, Andrea De Cesaris in 8th, and a 9th place for Mauricio Gugelmin. Now we've got Ayrton Senna crossing the line, being nearly 2 seconds quicker now than Nigel Mansell, but a very long way behind. And Mansell, I think, just cruising to the line, making sure he doesn't lose his concentration, and he does get that Williams Renault first to the finish line.
Well, there's not enough left for Mansell to do. He can afford to now drop off 5 or so seconds a lap. And here we see Nigel now coming up to the completion of his 58th lap. 2 to go as he comes across the start-finish line. Well, he hasn't slowed down very much. Lap 1 at 30.058, and there's Frank Williams. No emotion whatsoever on his face. Watching the monitors. He's got the Tag Heuer Olivetti monitor alongside the TV monitor.
Well, and Riccardo Patrese with the fastest lap of the race, the 1:26.148. That's the new lap record, and Patrese, who's now got that fastest lap with only 1.5 lap to go, and I don't think Nigel Mansell will try and challenge that.
Truthfully, I don't know what Riccardo thinks that was worth, because he was not going to get any points for a new fastest lap, a new lap record. He's some 16 or so seconds behind Nigel. He's not going to make that up in 2 laps. So really, other than doing it for himself, if you like the honour of having the fastest lap and a new lap record, of course, is a nice honour to have, but well, it's not going to make his 6 points for second place into 7 points, that's for sure.
Well, there, the man who's going to win another Grand Prix, and we'll probably hear from him how hot it was in the press conference after the race. And there, can we see a little bit of relief from Frank Williams when Nigel Mansell crosses the line. He's going to have 1 more lap to go.
Well, Nigel now coming across the line very slowly by the standard he's been doing for the previous 60 laps. That lap 1:31.401. But you can see the acceleration off that final chicane, not quite as rapid as we've seen throughout the remaining of the earlier part of the race. Now really just a question of last time around the toss a hairpin for Mansell, climbing up the hill all the way up to the Piratello corner, the corner where we saw Olivier Griard give him a very hard time for no apparent reason. Into 5th gear, yellow flag, stationary yellow flag out. Somebody's done something down at this Acqua Minerale chicane or in the Acqua Minerale itself. Well, there's a car off, stop there.
One of the Tyrrells.
One of the 2 Tyrrells. So we think that might be De Cesaris.
I think it will be De Cesaris, because he's now down in 12th place, and that means that Mauricio Gugelmin moves back up to 8th position.
So Nigel, for the last time now, certainly in the race, he will do a lap of honour, of course. Coming into the part 1 of the Ravazza down to 3rd gear. Short shifting into 4th, even at that sort of reduced pace. pick up the throttle into fifth, in through this Viaranti Marlborough, that's the fast right-left chicane, then down into third gear for the final chicane, and Mansell now coming across to record his fifth successive victory in 1992. A superb performance from Mansell, a superb performance from Riccardo Patrese. But remember, the Williams team absolutely dominant. The Renault V10 engine totally reliable. L-Fuel absolutely fantastic, and Riccardo Patrese on the last lap yet again breaking the lap record he had just established one lap earlier, ending up with a 1 minute 26.100, and a very, very fine end for Riccardo Patrese's 1992 San Marino Grand Prix here at the Imola circuit. Here's the man in third place, Ayrton Senna, relieved undoubtedly to be back in the points. He only gets 4 points for third place, but he's got his points momentum rolling again, and that really is important for Senna.
Well, Nigel Mansell, his 26th career Grand Prix victory, and Ayrton Senna stopping right after the finish line. Could that be running out of fuel, or is it just, I've had enough?
Well, I think it's a little bit of, again, gamesmanship, because obviously everybody was running very low on fuel. We saw Martin Brundle do the same. And part of the reason I suspect they do that is in case the car is marginal on fuel, it means it's very close to the car's weight limit. So you want to keep as much fuel in the car when the car would be scrutineered after the race. So I suspect that is the principal purpose for doing that. Of course, by pulling off like that, the tires will pick up a lot of rubber and dirt and so on and so forth. That will add to the weight of the car. But that man, Nigel Mansell, not troubled whatsoever and enjoying the fruits of his fifth Grand Prix victory. And he, of course, known as El Leone from his days with Ferrari in 1989 and 1990, a very, very popular man in Italy. They love him for his driving style. He really is a racing driver in their eyes, and they will give him a magnificent reception when he comes around to receive his first place trophy, get his bottle of what do you call it, fizz, champagne, and Mansell will climb up onto that podium a few moments after the presentations into the unilateral room, where he will hear pearls of wisdom from Nigel. He will give us chapter and verse as to how the victory took place. And there we see the championship points. Mansell leading 50 points, Riccardo Patrese second with 24.
Well, that being an enormous gap of 26 points over his own teammate. In third place, it's still Michael Schumacher, who didn't score any points here today and is still on 17. Williams Renault leading 74 points, Benetton 54, McLaren Honda 16, and then it's Ferrari in fourth place. We'll be back after the break.
From Riccardo Patrese with Ayrton Senna's McLaren Honda third. Martin Brundle finishes for Benetton for the first time since he joined the team in the points, an excellent fourth place. Michele Alboreto, for the third race in succession, takes points in fifth place for the Footwork Mugen team. Pierluigi Martini for Dallara Ferrari finishes sixth for the second time running. Maurizio Gugelmin gives some consolation to the hard-pressed Jordan Yamaha team, who've had so many problems this weekend, by finishing seventh. Olivier Griard, eighth. In ninth position, Eric Comas. In 10th position, Aguri Suzuki. 11th, JJ Leto, who of course finished well down. Wendlinger finished in 12th position. Belmondo in the second march was 13th, so that's good news for them. 14th was Andy De Cesaris. Only 14 out of the 26 starters finished, and De Cesaris was 5 laps adrift. And Riccardo Patrese's new lap record of the Imola circuit for the San Marino Grand Prix was 1 minute 26.1 seconds. And you look down now on the right, the Benetton Ford, and there, having passed the Williams Renault, is the McLaren Honda of Ayrton Senna. Now, hello, what's happened? There's a doctor, you can see that. Is this hydration? Whatever there is, that has to be Ayrton Senna in the car. because Berger, of course, his car was dragged away. That's Patrese at the front of the Williams-Renault. But after the race is finished, I remember Ayrton Senna in Brazil last year finished, having won the race, stricken with gearbox problems, in a state of extreme exhaustion. And it looks to me, I can't see any better than you can because I'm looking at the monitor, but it looks to me as though Ayrton Senna is still in the car. As far as I know, there was no contact problem as the crowd, as ever, break.
Hundreds of people running across the circuit to see Nigel Mansell, Riccardo Patrese and Ayrton Senna, but in fact Senna's still in his car, and we now know the reason why. Immediately the flag, he pulled over to the right hand side of the track. He has got the doctors there with him, and I suspect that Ayrton Senna is suffering from dehydration, because throughout the weekend he had a fairly heavy cold. It seemed something like hay fever. He's just had, well, feeling heavy. The doctors are with him. They're probably just giving him some more fluid to get that fluid back into his system. And there we see now Ayrton Senna receiving attention. Professor Watkins, the Formula One doctor, will be there administering some treatment to Ayrton Senna.
To see Josef Leberer, the man who looks after Gerhard and Ayrton, with some bottles.
Yes, undoubtedly Ayrton Senna throughout the race has been talking to the pits and explaining his situation. Presently Ayrton Senna still in the car, having some attention from Professor Watkins and Josef from the Willy Dungel Bio-Training Centre in Gars in Austria. The Dungel method of training is very much part of the training for McLaren drivers and of course for Marlboro drivers. They go up there in the off-season. One of the troubles for a driver, if he dehydrates heavily, he sweats heavily, of course you get severe cramp. And Ayrton sitting in the car, helmet off, just catching his breath, allowing himself the heart rate, his recovery rate. And in fact Ayrton Senna probably the fittest athlete in Formula One at the current time, so if he has a problem you can imagine what it must be like for anybody else out there. And really there's no need to rush to get him out of the car. The best thing is just to give him that chance to cool down, get some fluid into him. You don't want to really drink gallons and gallons of cold liquid, you just want to allow your body to recover. But of course it's a moment of concern for the team, that the driver, their number one driver, Ayrton Senna, the current world champion, is not suffering any more unduly than he needs to do. There's a stretcher there if they feel they want to take him off to the medical centre. Sometimes the body temperature can rise, and it's not unknown in races in hot climates, particularly more in closed cars like sports cars, to have a driver suffer heat exhaustion, and that really looks to me what Ayrton Senna is suffering from. Well, in the meantime, Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese on the podium.
Nigel Mansell, a very good fifth victory, and he's very, very happy with it. But Ayrton Senna, as you said, John, one of the fittest drivers in the Formula One world, and the fact that he's like this, I think shows you how hard a race it was.
Well, it certainly was a lot harder for Ayrton Senna than it was for Nigel Mansell or Riccardo Patrese. I can guarantee you that now. Such is the performance and the comfort in that Williams-Renault, the FW14B or 14C. It is such, the car really works for you. And here at Imola the circuit is bumpy, so of course the fatigue and the heat exhaustion that you may suffer from in a very hot Grand Prix like this is greatly reduced. And in Riccardo Patrese, I must say, looks extremely fit indeed. He looks barely like he's done a Grand Prix. Nigel totally jubilant. Look at the man, he's absolutely over the moon with his fifth consecutive Grand Prix win. the only winner in 1992. Ricardo, well, looks pretty cool, as I said, able to lift that substantial trophy comfortably above his head. Another man who, in spite of being in his late 30s, is a very, very fit athlete indeed. Ayrton Senna still in the car, and I suspect that very shortly now the doctors will attempt to take him out. And the treatment for heat exhaustion is literally to put you into a bed of ice, a bath of ice, to get that body temperature down to normal as quickly as possible.
Well, there's ceremonies going on the rostrum, Pripple trying to get Ayrton Senna out of the car. We'll be back with the winners of this race after the break.
Fans lopen langzaam richting de ingang van de pitstraat, want ook daar is dan eindelijk nu de kans voor om te gaan kijken. En Nigel Mansell zwaait naar het publiek, dankbaar voor wat ze gedaan hebben. Want ook hij weet dat fans belangrijk zijn. Ook al hebben ze in dit geval veel rode vlaggen getoond. En Ayrton Senna zit daar nog steeds in zijn auto. De volgende wedstrijd is over 2 weken in Monaco. Hier zien we duidelijk gelukkig in beeld dat Senna in ieder geval bij bewustzijn is. En er wordt geseind dat de helikopter daar weg moet. Je zag duidelijk de mensen omhoog kijken dat die helikopter maar moest verdwijnen. Nigel Mansell neemt zijn trofee mee en gaat richting de perskamer. Hij zal nog een half uurtje bezig zijn met het uitleggen van wat er allemaal gebeurd is vandaag. De fans hebben bezit genomen van het circuit in Imola. De racewagens zijn ervan verdwenen. Ayrton Senna zit uitgeblust in zijn auto. Kortom,